Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Zenway podcast. I'm your host Zenway. In this podcast, we talk everything about life, tech, and career. I spent the last decade at the intersection of tech and social sciences, and today with me we have a very special guest. His name is Sam. He's one of my seniors when we were studying in psychology, and we kind of crossed paths briefly. And after we have not met for actually more than a decade as well.
A decade. Yeah.
I realized that he went off to do something really interesting, and in fact various interesting stuff, right? So I'm quite excited to be talking to him today. So but before we dive into the conversation, Sam, why not you just introduce yourself to the audience very, very briefly. Yeah.
Sure. Well, first thing first, let me clarify. Being senior doesn't mean I have white hair, yeah? No, I haven't reached there yet, okay? So hi everyone, I'm very privileged to be attending this podcast here today. Thank you, Zen, for inviting. My name is Sam Kon. I'm the COO of Beyond Infinity Consultancy. We are the leading e-commerce consultancy in Southeast Asia. Thank you very much for having me here today.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you, and really a privilege to be able to have you as well. So I think to kind of jump straight in, right? One of the conversations, I guess one of the first few questions that I've asked, especially when we have common undergrad background, is really, what made you want to study psychology in the first place? Mm-hmm. And what was your thought process like when deciding your career during that time after you briefly graduated? Right?
Sure.
Yeah.
So I think that was an interesting start. Yeah. I have to admit this, psychology was most certainly wasn't my first choice. So I was born into a family of who does businesses. So right. Very naturally, we were supposed to do business and learn about business. Yeah. After Form 5, the first decision that came over was either do I take entrepreneurship or business. But somehow or rather, I didn't take those courses. I went into foundation to want to further explore my options. My parents were a little bit worried because they were wondering, not taking business how? Then our businesses how, right?
Right.
But I truly believe that if I want to embark on something, I have to learn about it and understand it. So what happened was, even at the age of 9 years old, I sold my first insurance policy. Right?
Wow, at 9 years old?
Yes, at 9 years old. We had to help, go out and help in the retail shop. It's something that we grew up with, or I grew up with.
Right.
So when I came to 18 years old, the first thing that I said is, what was the subject that can allow me to penetrate into all different areas? So the university, which we were both in as well, right? They recommended going to foundation, right? So foundation, with 1 year, we were able to explore different options. Then came mid of the year when there was an elective called psychology, introduction to psychology. And I thought, it must be a very boring subject. It's science, it's a lot of terminologies. But there weren't any much electives that I could take back then. So I thought, okay, this could be interesting. Maybe I can learn about serial killers and whatnot. Right. So I took it, and that literally opened Pandora box of questions coming into psychology. What made people to do what they want to do? What motivated people? And more importantly, during that time, psychology was considered a general degree that could enter into MNCs as HR, as a trainer. So I thought that was really interesting. And that was how I accidentally went into psychology.
Right.
So I think that was how I actually started with psychology. The rest was literally history. But when it comes to career choices, how psychology affected my career choices, I thought psychology gave me a foundation of understanding what the world is, how humans operate. For where I am here today, I can tell you it's completely unexpected. But psychology taught me to learn about humans, to be curious, to ask the right questions, to understand about data. And throughout my entire career, which we will share maybe later on in the podcast, will all lead to this.
Right. I wanted to kind of follow up a little bit on, I guess, maybe the background that you come from, right? Because I think that will, I guess, set the stage for I guess our conversation later when it comes to what you do today for e-commerce and things like that. Because I wanted to kind of understand what that environment was like, and that insurance policy at 9 years old, what happened, right? So were you excited about it? Because sometimes when we talk about people who come from businesses, right? I think similar background to you is that my father was part of a family business as well. And obviously the question about, do you want to enter and take over was also part of my consideration as well. So I think we haven't had a chance to talk about this, but I was actually in similar shoes as well, right? So I'm curious in terms of like whether, I mean, the environment that you grew up in, was it different or similar to mine, right? So what was that like in terms of like needing to really just go out with strangers and sell something? How was that experience for you?
Okay, so insurance and family business are two completely different experiences. So at a very young age, my family business involves in retail, and it started since my grandfather's time. So to date, it's still around, and I would say we have been around for more than 60 over years, near to 70 now. So how that happened and groomed us as a young age is that our parents used to work very young. So off and on during holidays, while people go for holidays, we will probably work in the shop. We'll help when we can, do our homework there, spend our nights over there. That was how I grew up with. Obviously, I still have a childhood, not to worry. There was no child slavery involved.
Voluntary.
It was moderate. It was moderate. And so we grew up thinking that it's not easy to earn money. And we grew up with that concept. So even when I was young, to spend on McDonald's was not something that I would easily spend, because I understand the struggles of a family, and I understand the struggles of gaining every cent. So we grew up with that. Now, how the insurance came about was very interesting. So it was sort of like a fair where it was open for public. And what happened was my parents agreed with one of our dear friend to put me as a part-timer to sell insurance. So my goal was to, and this is really funny, my goal was to gain as much attention from street passerby to come to our booth and then to close the deal, So I was in the first half of the morning, my goal, and they thought maybe having a cute boy going around can get a lot of people. But trust me, back in the days, it's the same rejection. The moment people hear about insurance, they'll get rejected. So then that was when I learned, and this is part of my family training, is that we learn different scripts. So for example, if I would say, hi, would you like to buy insurance? That's the most typical thing, right? I then evolved to learn that, and I observed a lot of people that, hey, actually a lot of people during the fair, they're eating a lot of stuff. That's the best time that I should approach them rather than people who pass by. So then I walk around the fair and I say, hey, is that Yao Jia Guai very nice? By the way, do you have time? Would you like to come to my booth? So we evolved that script. And it came to the final evolvement that it worked. And how I landed my first deal was, there was this lady that walked over and said, can I have 5 minutes of your time? It was something that it just came up from my mind. And the lady, sure, yes, 5 minutes for you, sure.
Young boy, young man.
Young man, cute person, right?
Yes.
And that was how I brought her over to the booth, and then we closed the deal. So that was my very first time that I learned that in sales talk, there's no such thing as one script for everything. And all this are all learned from the family business.
Right. Yeah, I think that spirit of experimenting and being able to really just have that courage to try things and being able to wanting to understand things,
and the spirit of being rejected multiple times.
Hey, that I truly believe that someone has to go through the service industry and sell something to really to be able to kind of embrace the challenges in life.
Absolutely.
And why I say that is really because I think perhaps that has instilled, and correct me if I'm wrong, right? That probably instilled some form of spirit of exploration, which brings me to like the broad-ranging things that you have done, right? Before this, obviously, I wanted to kind of respect your time, so I looked through your profile. You've done everything from the start, hosting, research with Kantar, and all these sorts of events. We were with Hanatan as well, doing events and stuff. So looking back, how did that actually shape which part of those experiences shape your experience, the most?
So those were the earlier parts of my career, and some of them were even when I was studying. I was handling multiple jobs as well. I think one of the experience, if I were to share to the audience here today, I think it would be with Kantar. So back then it was called TNS Research before they were being acquired by the Kantar Group. So it was my first official job off from psychology graduate with Bachelor of Honours. I didn't get first class, obviously.
Neither did I.
But I think second upper was all right. But back then, my batch, the peers, they were very strong. They were pretty much first class, second upper. So I was pretty much together with them. But I was asking myself that if the competition of graduates is so many, how do I compete with them? And true enough, among my peers, I was one of the later ones who enter into a proper working job. Just to sidetrack a little bit, when I graduate, I followed my friends to become to apply for air hostess.
Ah,
Right, you
yes,
know,
yes,
cabin
yes, yes,
crew.
yes.
You know, we travel all the way to Penang, to Ipoh, and to KL, and,
Right.
and I just flaunt my interview all the way.
Right.
Yeah, and you know they had 6 stages of interview, right?
Oh dear, wow.
Yeah, the first stage I immediately got kicked out. You know, and when I asked from the interviewer, what was my mistake or
Yes.
were there anything, they said none. You know, it's just that because you're not chosen.
Oh.
So I guess there was a reason to that,
Okay.
right?
Right.
And then later on, I found TNS research, and
I
I've
see.
applied for it,
Right.
and I gotten through it. During that period of time, how it really shaped me was I had a really good manager. I guess I'm very blessed because the manager took care of me, taught me things that I didn't know about it.
Right.
And my very first project, I mean, we handle clients like Petronas, Caltex, you know, and also Perodua. So these were my key account clients.
Right.
But back then we were handling one particular project, which was sorry, I can't say.
Yeah.
But
Which
it's-
industry?
yeah, it was actually a retail industry.
Okay.
So very
Yeah.
similar with my family background as well.
Right,
But they are just pure retail.
Okay.
And what happened was it was involving brand transitioning. So between brand A transitioning to brand B.
Wow, okay.
So whereas a lot of Malaysians were very used to this brand A, suddenly they want to switch to brand B. You know, so they engage us. How is it done?
Right.
I clearly remembered I was being showed a lot of data, and I have to say that maths is not particularly my field.
Right.
But because in psychology we had to deal with statistics, a lot of data,
Quantitative methods, yeah.
yeah, you are quant, right?
Yeah.
I came from qual, so what happened with this particular one was I took a very qual approach to it.
Right.
And the client had the first hand of seeing qualitative approach from the data that we have collected. And from the qualitative, I was able to narrate a story for them, to tell them the insights and recommendations.
Yeah.
It was purely something that I was very interested,
Yeah.
but at the same time, I feel like it was my strengths in qualitative. So I decided to take the qualitative approach. My manager didn't disapprove. She
Didn't
didn't
expect it, right,
she
okay.
didn't expect it, but
Yeah.
she did not disapprove.
Nice.
She thought it was a really good
Wow.
approach as
Yeah.
well. So that was my first, feel like a win, in that. And then from there, I felt like, hey, it's okay to try something new. It's okay to be different. It's okay to be bold. And if I make mistakes, I can do it all over again, and that's fine.
Right.
I thought that experience really taught me something very different in life.
Yeah.
And it was my very first time, having that confidence to do something different.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting because I think when you talk about brand transitions and stuff like that, I remember my thesis was in brand personality as well. Yeah. So, there are connections, like it or not, you always have some sort of perception, and that brand somehow, if you ask people to picture a particular brand in their head, what would you picture? You probably picture a cool guy, a nerdy guy, or a very stylish lady, or
Exactly.
a very courageous strong woman, for example. That always is very interesting. Therefore the qualitative approach works really well.
Yep.
So I think you mentioned around giving yourself that confidence to be able to try different things. Is that what also, I guess, perhaps shaped you for your next step as well? Because I realized that you went on to try different things. Right? What was that thought process behind that next step, right? Why didn't you stay in Kantara, for example?
Right. Back then,
Yeah.
again, I can't believe that I'm saying this back then. Sorry, audience.
Not to date yourself.
Yeah, not to date myself, but really, being a millennial then was being branded very similar to how Gen Zs are now today.
Right, we're flaky.
We are flaky, we are very indecisive,
Yeah.
we are not confident, we don't know what we are doing.
Yeah.
We feel like the whole world is crumbling around, and everyone is thinking like,
Us
what
against
the
the
hell?
world."
What are you doing right now, So we were at that juncture as
Right.
well. However, I was in a slightly different position. What happened was in Kantar, I was offered a position to further develop my career.
Yeah.
Go to the UK, get certified, be bonded with the company for the next 2 years. It was an awesome opportunity for someone like me who's very new and
Right.
first job.
Yeah, for
Huge
sure.
salary bump, right?
Nice, yeah.
However, an opportunity arrived.
Okay.
A headhunter approached me and recommended that, would you like to try out in the training industry? And I clearly remember when I was in psych graduate, I loved the idea of training. I like to talk.
Right.
It's something innate in me. Yeah.
Yeah.
So then I had the privilege to speak to the director of the company, and then I thought, why not give it a try? So I spoke with my manager in respect with the company and also my HR managers as well. And they were very supportive. As much as they thought that I was a talent to move forward with,
Right.
they tried and reasoned with me, your career path with us is this, so and so. However, we also feel that your key strengths can be developed here. So for the first time, I can tell you that my then company was very selfless. So they really laid out very clearly for me, as though like I'm really new. And they told me that it seems that your passion lies around this area. You know, we will support your decision, whatever that you are willing to do.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
so we had that one-to-one with both my HR managers and my manager as well. And they encouraged me, you know, if you want, please go ahead. And that was how I was being pushed to the training industry.
Nice.
Yeah, at that thought, I was like thinking, oh shoot, you know, it's completely new. You know, I as much as I love to talk, it's still a new industry. At least market research was something more relatable.
Yes.
Training is a completely new animal to me.
New skill sets that are
Totally new
required.
skill
Yeah,
sets. So I brought on the same thinking. If I fail,
Right.
I will be able to climb back up and do it again. It's fine.
Right.
Because I have very supportive managers. I have people who support me and people who believe in me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought these beliefs helped me transition towards the new thought process of transitioning to the new role.
Right. And in terms of, I guess maybe the biggest challenge that you faced, or maybe I was part of the training industry for a short while as well. And, you know, the more you talk, the more similarities that I find. Right. I was assisting trainers. Right.
Yep.
I was an intern at Literonomics as well, which is you know.
We were competitors.
Yeah, we were competitors, but you know, I was just an intern back then,
Of
right?
course.
So obviously I get to experience what a trainer does, facilitation and things like that.
Yeah.
There are always very interesting participants,
Right.
Right. There are
Always.
always very interesting clients and scenarios that you needed to deal with. Maybe to kind of maybe just. Share one example, or maybe the most interesting experience that you face, in training.
Sure.
Is there one?
Yes,
Yeah.
there will one be very memorable.
Yeah.
I still remembered it was probably my 6 months into the company.
Okay.
And I think that the company that I worked with back then was the Jungle People. They value a lot of values. They really walk the talk. And I really like about the company is because they really train and they really do what they say. So at my 6 months in, after being, we have to move up the ranks, being assistant trainer, I'm being facilitator, assistant trainer. So I was being groomed to be a main trainer.
Okay.
And I clearly remember at that point of time, I was handling a telecommunications company. At that point of time, my managers thought that, I was ready. Right, so why not we just give you a little prod to see how you survive,
Okay.
right? So I'm the kind of person whom I'm okay. You can push me, I can take it. If I can't, I will tell you, right? So my first ever experience in that was not only just mental but physical. So number one, we had to go through physical trainings when we were with the company. So a lot of physical trainings, a lot of PTs, a lot of hiking into the jungles to make sure that we are physically fit.
Yes.
We need to be certified as a lifesaver to ensure that the safetyness of our participants. I still bring all these values today. And secondly was my outlook. I do not appear as how I am today. You can ask all my friends and my peers how I used to dress up. So it's very important to carry out that kind of impression that we give to the clients.
Yes.
So
First impression, right? First 10-15 seconds we made judgment
15
already.
seconds,
It's very hard
exactly.
to recover from it. Right?
So one of my managers brought me to shopping.
Right.
And did me a 360 turn. Okay, wear properly, be appropriate.
Nice. Yeah.
So what was the shocking last part was I didn't know this was dealing with C-suites.
Oh.
Yeah. So your CEO, your COO, your CFOs.
That's not a prod, man. That's literally push, man.
That was literally a catapult, right? So I only got to know that, nearer to date as well. But it was very interesting because I was very excited for the challenge.
Okay.
And what happened was during that training, my manager was although shadowing me as well, but she also felt that it was very comfortable for me to move forward. Obviously, days before we prepared. A lot of things that we need to go through, scenarios that we need to anticipate, and obviously C-suite people read much more than me, right?
Yeah.
So I also had to double up my reading on what's happening in the current news to relate. So that whole experience It was a 1 day dialogue training.
Okay.
Yep. And what happened was, at the end of the day, the comment that was given by the entire team from the telecommunications company was 5 stars.
Wow.
Was literally, yes, we know you are young, you may
Uh-huh.
be shivering in front,
Yeah.
but you had the balls
Yeah.
to say and also to facilitate us. They didn't give me a vanilla trip, okay? It
Yeah.
wasn't as sweet as easy as I thought.
Yeah.
Just because even though I introduced myself as a junior trainer, didn't give them a single leeway to go easy on me. They went all out.
Yeah.
And I remember the CEO then told me that this is
Yeah.
the world.
Yeah.
That at the end of the day, you are going to stand at where you are, doing the best that you can, but people is still going to throw at you. The most important part is you need to remember who you are, what you do, and
What
do
you
it
bring.
well. Yeah.
Wow.
So that really
Yeah.
stuck me through.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought I was
Amazing.
going to flaunt. I literally thought I was going to flaunt.
Yeah.
It wasn't a prod, it was a catapult.
Yeah, for sure. You know, like so many different experiences that you just described, right? And I guess most importantly, the mentality, or I guess what you tell yourself, seem to lead towards the word grit and perseverance. And you know, like you really just will tough it out and really do your best at every juncture, right? Which brings me to, I guess, when we spoke about some of this off camera and around, like there is a particular stretch of your I guess your career and your life that this was really tested, right? I was wondering whether if you could share that journey, right? What happened after the Jungle People? And it sounded like, hey, this is like baptism by fire, I'm ready to go, after this I can conquer anything, right? Then what happened after that, right? Because you seem to have taken a few junctures as well.
Right.
Yeah.
So after the training industry, I landed into the retail industry. It was back in the family business for a while. What happened was, around that time, retail was not doing very well, as in general retail. So back in the retail business, I had to figure out what would be the new channels of sales,
Right.
how could I expand into different markets, and how could we make sure that the business continued to thrive. Back then, it was e-commerce was considered infancy.
Right.
It was so infancy that the only e-commerce word you probably have ever heard of is maybe Mudah,
Right.
Shopify,
Right.
Lao Yat Forum.
Oh yeah, Lao Yat
Okay,
Forum.
there you go.
Yeah,
right.
there
So
you go.
these were the only words
Yeah.
that people will say WTB, WTS. Want to buy, want to sell. Yep, these were the terminologies that we use.
Yeah.
So I explored those channels. And then later on, then we stumbled upon other e-commerce platforms such as Lazada, Shopee that came along during that period of time. But I would have to say it was my toughest period in handling retail business. Number one, because there's family expectations.
Yes.
Number two, e-commerce had no guidance back then. That you wouldn't have anyone who is able to share those kind of resources.
Yeah.
People who are successful, they wouldn't share with you why they have successful, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of it has to do with self-exploration. You go network and you go learn. Now, at the same time, I was also trying to explore my passion,
Right.
which was coffee.
Right.
Right. I just so everyone knows, I don't drink Nescafe. Okay. Simply because I don't drink 3-in-1.
Right.
Yeah. I prefer a freshly brewed coffee.
Right.
And how?
But before you go into this, right, where did that come from? That coffee passion? Because we've been talking about many things, right?
Yes.
Where did that come from? Before
Okay.
we jump into it, right, just a quick one. Right?
Okay. Truth to be told,
Yeah.
I always have a negative connotation on coffee.
Right.
Simply because when young, we heard of all these rumors that people drink coffee and they had heart palpitation and
It's bitter.
it's bitter, it's bad.
Yeah,
I tried
yeah.
before, I just didn't like it.
Yeah.
But at the age of maybe 21, 22, it was the cafe culture boom in Malaysia. I was very honored that a friend of mine brought me to one cafe in PJ, but it has closed down now,
Right,
unfortunately.
right. Yeah.
And I've tasted my first hand fresh brewed coffee. And that's sort of like, I thought, hey, it's really pleasant. There's really a lot of notes into it. I'm not a connoisseur, by the way, but there's just a lot of flavor into it.
Okay.
And I thought, hey, it's very enjoyable. So when I came back into the family business, I had some control of time. Right?
Okay.
Although we work, 7 days a week, 24 hours, a day,
Yeah.
but we still have some form of time.
Of course, yeah.
So I thought, it's stressful working in a family environment as well. Why not I reward myself by learning something different, which was coffee. So that was how it then embarked. And also at the same time, because work was so hectic, I needed coffee.
Yes.
I think back then all the work was
Yeah.
nothing compared to this particular work.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So that was how I stumbled upon coffee. The cafe culture boomed, and at the same time, there was an offer online that you can learn about coffee brewing for $80.
Right.
Remember
Yeah.
Groupon?
Yes. Groupon. Yes.
Groupon. Yep.
Yes,
so
we are dating ourselves.
Yes,
Groupon,
yes. So it was Groupon. So I bought that and I attended the class, and from there everything just transpired.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I took my coffee classes more seriously.
Yeah.
I went for certification as well. So I went for ED Barista certification.
Yeah.
And then further on moving, I had the opportunity to work and travel. It was one of those things that you want to do before you hit 30.
30, yeah.
Right? Have you tried it before?
I thought about it.
Okay.
Didn't pull the trigger. Glad you did.
I'm glad you saved me some space, but that's okay. Because it wasn't easy to get it. I had to open 2 laptops and 2 mobile devices just to get a slot in.
I didn't even know it was that competitive.
It was. I was just very lucky to be able to land it. I didn't plan to I really want to go for it. I just thought if I get it, I can decide later on.
Oh damn.
Okay. Sorry, I mean I don't mean to hurt anyone here, but that was God's honest truth.
Oh, it's okay. I mean, it's still this skill still applies. If you buy a Taylor Swift concert, you don't care. Just buy
yes,
first.
exactly.
Just buy first. Back to that.
So what I did was I thought, hey, with the certification, I work as a part-time barista, I have some experience. Maybe when I go to work and travel in New Zealand, I could spend some money, you get what I mean? I could work at the same time, earn some money and travel around. That was my thought. So that was exactly what I did. I went to New Zealand, so it was 6 months. The first thing that could cross my mind is I do not want to work in cherry picking farms or plucking apples or sorting out medical. I thought it wasn't suited for me. I would rather work in retail or cafe. Right. Yeah. So I was lucky to land in a retail job. But then somewhere in between, I decided to want to further deepen my coffee knowledge. At that point of time, I have already attended multiple competitions already.
Wow.
I just had the balls to go for it. It doesn't mean that I win, but I just had the balls to go for it.
It's a good experience.
It is. Competitions always makes me feel excited.
Yes.
I think I'm generally competitive.
Oh yeah, you are competitive. I remember during the university days when you have inter-department sports competition, we were annoying as heck.
Yes,
right?
we did cause hell.
Annoying.
We caused hell.
We caused hell. We were annoying. So
and
I
we
totally
won.
know.
In our year, we won, right? Yeah, we are very glad. So if Dr. Go, you are watching this, thank us later. Thank you very much. So in New Zealand, I landed in Wellington, which is the middle
lovely
of
place.
lovely place, which is also the highest coffee per capita, cafes per capita. So I remembered I wanted to land on a coffee job just to learn more on the skill, right? I went and knocked on 223 cafes.
Damn. 233.
Yeah,
there were that many in Wellington.
223.
Oh, 223, yes.
223.
There were that many in Wellington.
Damn. So those were all the cafes that I was able to find. So in a span of 3 days, I went through all. I faced rejections, I faced interviews, I faced non-response, you name it. But pretty much at the end of 223, I only ended up with 2 interviews and 1 tryout.
Wow.
Right? And regardless of what I had, my experiences in Malaysia, my certification that was internationally recognized, they just decided not to hire.
Wow.
For whatever reasons.
Okay.
So
and they didn't tell you.
They won't tell you. Yeah, they won't tell you. Yeah,
okay.
They won't tell you.
Right.
Even though in my tryouts I was fine, I was serving coffee almost 100 cups a day.
Right.
No issues. But they still decided not to move forward with it.
Okay.
So I was fairly disappointed. I would say it was pretty much the lowest point in my life.
Wow.
Just imagine, you get rejected 223 times over 3 days.
Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah, it was really crazy.
Wow.
But then, things happen for a different reason.
Yes.
I was staying with a host in Airbnb. She happens to be a chef, a cafe owner.
Okay.
It so happened the first 3 days when I was in Wellington, I didn't get to see her. But on the fourth day, we managed to meet up.
Right.
And then she was asking me what's my purpose there. Oh, you
Right.
wanted to learn about coffee. Hey, you know what? I know I have a cafe.
Right.
I know my suppliers. I know these people. Why not I just introduce you to them?
Right.
And there it was. Magic happens. Right after that, one after another, I got introduced to a coffee roaster. I got introduced to cafes. The next thing is they're inviting me to all their events, to their competitions, and the next 3 months, I was just playing with coffee. I
That's
was literally
crazy.
competing for coffee. I traveled around whole of New Zealand just for competition.
Oh my goodness.
So it was just pure fun.
Wow.
Yeah, so I would say that was a really my lowest point in life,
Right.
but also a very high point when positive things happen.
Wow, that's crazy because, man, 200 over rejections. What was in your head to be able to kind of pick yourself up? Okay, this is me, right? If I were you, after maybe the 50 or the 60 or perhaps even the 100 if I push myself,
Right.
I'll start to question myself and then perhaps how do you even get yourself to the 101? Right? What were you telling yourself?
A very good question. I think it must be too traumatic for me to think back. But if I were to reimagine in my scenario, back then I only treated it as a number.
I see.
So I knew that there was 223 cafes in Wellington.
Right.
This has not accounted the time when I got rejected in Christchurch some more.
Oh dear.
Yeah, I was walking more than 10,000 steps a day to go to different cafes for interview.
Right.
And only ended up in Wellington. So let's talk about Wellington.
Yeah.
To me, it was a number. You know, like how people, or how we see in movies that people sit in jail, right, to
Yeah.
pass through the time and then they scratch and then they scratch off.
Yeah.
It was the exact same thing for me.
Yeah.
I logicalized it and made it a number rather than being feel too emotionally attached.
Wow.
But trust
Yeah.
me, it was daunting. It was truly daunting. There were times where I just sat in the cafe and just thinking, why won't they give me a job? What is it that I lack? Is it because I'm Asian? Is it because I'm not good enough? Am I not on par with them? Or is my certification not useful for them? So a lot of self-doubts that happen. But then I will realign my thoughts again and say, look, it's a number. Until we conquer the last number, we'll know what's the result. Until then, I cannot and I should not give up.
Whoa.
So soldier it on.
Super powerful. And I think that kind of brings us to, I guess, back to kind of like e-commerce perhaps, right? Because that's literally sales, that's literally probably one of the most competitive, if not the most competitive, I guess, landscape in Malaysia as well, right? Because everybody is eyeing this pile of, I guess, spending power, right? Okay, so after that experience, right, how did that help you to kind of venture back, right? Because obviously it has taught you a lot about life, about all those different things, right? How did you come back to e-commerce and apply all that you have learned? Right? Yeah.
So it was only a 6 months visa.
Yeah.
I didn't extend. I didn't plan to stay on to
Yeah.
work or anything. So definitely I have to come back.
Of course,
right?
yeah.
And very naturally I continue my work as well as e-commerce.
Yeah.
And I think back then it was still with the business as well.
Yeah.
I think what I gained in New Zealand was learning about the different businesses that happen in retail. In New Zealand, e-commerce was also considered something that was a little bit advanced, but the people were much more receptive.
Right.
Yeah. Whereas in Malaysia, it was considered extremely infant. So I was back at square one, and then at that point of time when I came back, it was already the time for where Lazada, Shopee has already came in. And back then, before I left, I've already onboarded the business onto it.
Yeah.
So then when I came back, I had a different task. The idea was to grow e-commerce and also at the same time explore what were some of the cost-effective ways of doing e-commerce as well. So those were part of my projects to help to propel forward for the business.
I see.
So when you said, it was what everyone was looking at, I would say at that point of time, from my perspective, we were solving a different problem. It wasn't like how to get the sale or, how can we market it better. It was more of how, with the sale coming in so much, how can my operations support the sales? Because in Malaysia, if let's say someone were to order something, they expect it to arrive maybe the next day or in 2 days later. Right. So there were a lot of expectations in the Malaysian industry compared to our peer countries. Our expectation of arrival is much more shorter. So at that point of time, the business has to make sure that our operations are able to support this e-commerce business.
Right. That's really interesting because on one hand, you mentioned that it was fairly infancy, but on the other hand, where the heck did we get our expectation of next day delivery or the next 2 days, right? Because if I think back, right, back then when it wasn't as vibrant, the thing that often get delivered to your house was what? Mail and food, pizza, right?
No, there wasn't food, but pizza
right?
was one of it. Yes,
right. Pizza was one of the first few, right? It was mail and pizza,
Yeah.
right? And mail literally takes forever. We know that, and sometimes it goes missing. So where do you think that expectation comes from?
Right. I think at that point of time, it was during the era where e-commerce has started.
Yeah.
There were a lot of promises about e-commerce saying that we will make sure the delivery runs smoothly. We will make sure that you receive your items in 3 to 5 business days.
Right.
And because the volume from consumers were not a lot.
Right.
However, the volume of sellers on board were also not a lot. So very naturally, those who were online back then, the orders will come to those who were already online.
Right.
So we were one of the first pioneers to go into these marketplaces.
Right.
And hence, we would say we caught the first wave.
Nice.
So being pioneer means we caught the first wave, but we also caught the first wave of problems. And hence, that's why when I was back, we will had to deal with these challenges as well.
Right. I guess that's kind of related to one of the initial questions that I kind of originally planned, which is what are some of the interesting behind the scenes running an e-commerce that people a lot of people don't realize, right? So you mentioned the run around hey, you know what? It's not just about getting the sales in; it's about how to fulfill the sales. How do you make sure that the operations is able to really get that 5-star rating, barang dah sampai,
Yeah.
So what are the behind the scenes stuff that we don't realize,
Are you familiar with 99?
Yes.
11-11?
Yeah.
12-12?
Correct, yeah.
Right. So at that time, no one would be very familiar with this. This took years of conditioning and campaigning as well. But let me share with you some of the recent behind the scenes that has happened in 99 and also some of the major campaigns. Our clients had to actually go into the warehouse to make sure that stocks are pretty much enough. And when I say sufficient, it's pretty much like a 20,000 square feet of warehouse, enough material to support the sales.
Wow.
These are the kind of materials that you need to make sure whenever like a 9/9, 11/11, 12/12 happens, or either when the Chinese New Year sales comes in. When you need to prepare for this kind of campaigns, many people thought, it's just another sale, right? But for us who takes very serious into the game, our clients and we actually plan almost 9 months ahead. So meaning from stock to promotion to campaigning to marketing to understanding what the trend and foreseeing what's coming.
Right.
This takes 9 months of planning.
So 9/9 is literally January.
Yes.
Damn. Okay. And in terms of, trends and patterns, right? Does it hold? Because you're talking about 9 months in advance, and sometimes trends come and go.
Yep.
Does it translate in terms of predictability wise, right, from year to year, for example? Because it's almost a year, right?
Yeah. So trends definitely comes and goes. However, there are some core trends that still remain. So consumer behaviors will definitely still remain, especially how we purchase. In terms of what they purchase, that could shift based on certain trends as well. So obviously in our analysis early of the year, where our experience come in, that's where we consult our clients what exactly they need to prepare. But speaking of interesting event, so as much as e-commerce is pretty much a lot of people think that it's buying, selling, and just putting buyers and sellers and brands, our involvement actually is much on a larger scope. So BIC actually works with Southeast Asia and Europe countries as well. And more recently, we were also involved in government talks as well between countries to facilitate what are sort of the e-commerce infrastructures that a country require for them to enable e-commerce to boom. So we were very lucky to be involved in the dialogue talk as well. And this actually gives new perspective because who knows actually when a country requires to have online, there are so many things that needs to be prepared. Not just your courier, but your warehousing, your infrastructure of railroads, and also airplanes as well. So all these were quite interesting things that we were exposed to during my time of work.
Yeah, I mean, since we're on that, right, on BIC, I guess maybe to kind of take a step back, yes, it is, consulting and obviously advisory on many fronts when it comes to e-commerce. Tell me a little bit about who would want, what is the persona of customers that will come to BIC, right? What do they look like? What do they do? Because I hear governments, I hear obviously sellers as well, right? So if you were to kind of tell me a profile of customers to go and look for? What would that look like?
So we do have a plethora of customers.
Yeah.
It ranges from government agencies coming to MNCs who are basically brands. They're multinational companies who have presence in different regions of the countries. So they could be coming into Malaysia and say, hey, we want to bring this German brand into Malaysia. How could we do this and partner with you to come up with a plan to strategize it? We also have local sellers. There are many of SMEs and SMBs as well. Some of them, they will say we do not know about e-commerce much, but we do plan to have our team. Can you train our team? So BIC was set up in such a way whereby we are an e-commerce consultancy and training company as well. So we help people to solve problems. But if let's just say you decide that you want to solve it yourself, we can train you how to solve it as well.
Right. And to be able to do that, obviously it is an accumulation and also the result of many years of experience that you have.
13 years.
13 years, right? And I guess as part of growing that foundation and expertise of BIC and of course yourself, I saw that you were a long-time partner and in fact an seller ambassador for Lazada. There was I guess the Alibaba and Taobao University. Pretty intensive stuff, right? Tell us a little bit about that experience, right? Especially like Taobao University. Like what is that like?
Okay.
Yeah.
So they are pretty much a little bit correlated because they all belong within the Alibaba ecosystem.
Right, yeah.
So first, when I was in e-commerce, I was being appointed as the seller ambassador for Malaysia. So I was handling the Malaysia side of things, whereby we handle a community of sellers. We help them to grow. We share our differences. We share our challenges. And what we do is, as ambassadors, we will then present these problems to the platforms. So then hopefully they are able to work on something to ease our life. So that was pretty much about it. However, more importantly, during the ambassador time as well, I was also involved or nominated to become a Taobao University appointed trainer as well. How that happened was that number one, Taobao, as you know, is the number one marketplace platform in China. They're the largest then. What happened is they also have a learning arm, which is the L&D. So this learning arm then certifies trainers who have number one, record sales. So it's GMV driven. So the sales will determine what sort of experiences that you had. Number two is whether you have the skill sets, the kind of mindset and skill set to be able to train. And number three, you have to go through a rigorous training as well, and then only to get certified. So I went through the training, I got certified because of my training background as well. But at the same time, it's more towards my experience. Back then, I had more than 10 years of experience already in e-commerce. So I understand what happened in China and also what happened in Malaysia.
Right.
So after being certified that, then we were able to deliver trainings as well. So these are much more advanced stuff. In 2019, on a separate occasion, Alibaba invited me to visit their ecosystem as well. So it was a program to select 1,000 entrepreneurs around the world. So I was being among the 1 out of 1,000 to be selected. So very privileged to visit China for almost 2 weeks,
right.
To understand how their hypermarket grow, how their e-commerce is, what's their data technology like, what's their server like, what's their logistic like. So it was literally understanding the entire China e-commerce ecosystem. So then I brought back that wealth of knowledge in Malaysia and also shared and also helped people with that as well.
Right. Talking about Taobao, I was listening to a podcast quite a while back, and I was really mind blown in terms of the amount of, I guess, innovation and also the sheer speed that they run at, right? So I was listening to it, and they were talking about how their ecosystem is as such where back then they all many years back they already have like key influencers that has their own fashion brands, and they will literally have drops back then already, right? Before we even have drops here, they would then literally when the items go live, it was not stockpiling. They were literally sold out in minutes, and they're already calculating and directly liaising with the production parts of things, and they are synced up in matters of minutes and seconds, right? And be able to really just deliver that, right? And the amount of, I guess, customization that they have on each of their storefronts, for example, kind of like perhaps like a Shopify kind of environment, right? So I'm curious in terms of like what you saw in the ecosystem and perhaps in during the Taobao University times in terms of how different it is China today, right? Are there any things that they are doing that we're not doing yet that are exciting to you as well?
Let me give you just a little bit of mathematics calculation. Yeah.
Right.
So China has about 1.4 billion
Correct.
people.
Yeah.
Malaysia to date we have about 32 million of people.
Mm-hmm.
So based on that ratio, think about the opportunities, the challenges, and the
Scale.
there's a scale that we're talking about.
Right.
So already from based on population standpoint, we see that difference.
Yeah.
Now, when we talk about in terms of challenges, the reason why I feel that they are also faster is because the amount of problems they're able to foresee. I mean, you talk about the ratio. 33 million problems versus 1 billion problems. That's how much they need to solve.
Right.
And that's how many more different variations that they're able to solve. So I think the reason why they can progress so much is because of that as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So what about some of the, I guess, interesting things that they're already doing in terms of like
Right.
e-commerce stuff?
So in 2019, when I was in China, live stream was already starting.
Right.
Whereas in Malaysia, it was considered like, I'm waiting by the fence, see who is doing it, whether got results, then only I do.
Right.
But in China, it's different. People seize the opportunity very differently. When there's something new, a new technology being introduced, they are very welcoming to it.
Right.
Of course, this is also based on the sellers that have interacted in China as well, and they shared the same sentiment. Whereas when back in Malaysia in 2019, when we were talking to our clients to go onto live stream, most of them will be on the fence. Regardless of how interesting the position can be, most of them were still on the fence, simply because the culture hasn't reached. So I feel that as much as technology has arrived, if the culture has not yet received, it cannot be deployed. Now, fast forward to 2023 now, right? What do we have? We have live stream, we have TikTok, we have Facebook Live, we have Shopee Live, we have so many different kind of live. People are watching from Monday to Sunday, and then at different hours, it's literally like a mini TV, right? And now this is the growing trend right now.
Right.
And at this period of time, our clients are already onboarded, luckily. But also, they also had to see what was really moving in Malaysia. So think about it, 2019 versus now, that's like 4 years fast forward.
Correct.
Right. So imagine now in China, they would have a slightly different trend already.
Right.
Yeah.
Have you seen what's perhaps haven't caught fire, might caught fire? Or do we need to talk to BIC?
That's a trade secret.
Yeah, so in terms of like that's definitely really very eye-opening, right? In terms of being able to kind of see at least 4 to 5 years ahead and being able to really just share with your clients, right? I think that's really powerful. But how do you, I guess this part, I guess the next part is really back to your own, I guess, entrepreneurial journey as well, right? You mentioned about family business, and now having your own consultancy. So how do you decide to kind of like open your own consultancy firm in the first place, right? How does that kind of reconcile with family business as well? Because I think that's a very typical Asian family question.
Yes. You really put me on the spot.
Sorry, uncle.
Hey, uncle.
No. To your father, it's like, uncle. Sorry.
Okay.
Uncle Sam, Uncle Kon. If I touch a soft spot, sorry.
So family business was going very well. I think my mission there was pretty much done.
Yes.
At that point of time was making sure that operations was running. But then during that time, because my exposure to e-commerce was so vast, I've met so many different people, so many different sellers, so many different industries. I questioned myself, can my experience and skill set be only limited to one industry, which was my family business?
Right.
And so that question grew into, what if I can replicate my experience and be exposed more? Because I'm the kind of person who cannot stagnate. I need to challenge myself. I need to find new things. I need to challenge with new solutions. So that was what made me to decide to start my own consultancy. Now, obviously, starting my own consultancy also wasn't easy as well.
Of course.
It had its much challenges, but that was exactly what I wanted.
Right.
I remember clearly telling myself at the day one in my consultancy this, I want to deal with different industry, different countries, different things. Boom, you have no idea all the kind of industries I'm dealing with right now, from government agencies, from different car, automotives, from sports, from fashion, from lingerie, right? Okay. The kind of industries that we've been exposed to are just way too much. Right. And I'm just loving my job right now.
Yeah, I think that's great, because I wanted to ask you, like, because you deal with so vast different I guess many different industries, right? Which one is the one that you find most interesting? Because come on, electronics, been there, done that, like I guess people are used to it. Of course I love technology, but I'm curious in terms of like what industry do you find like really interesting perhaps in the recent years or maybe even now, right? It's like the kind of like challenges is really, really like different,
I would say one of the industry that I was a little bit much more interested was the automotive industry. Number one, I'm not a car person.
Right.
Yep. So to understand how automotive move around the world was slightly different. Number two, how the automotive industry targets female. It's also different as well, because now we see more female interested into automotive items as well.
Right.
So it was a very interesting perspective because it was something that hasn't been done before.
Right.
And I was being tasked to do it and tasked to strategize it.
Right.
So it involves a lot of market research, involves a lot of understanding what's the market like, and it involves a lot of interviews as well to know what's actually people thinking.
Right.
So again, finding the right product fit is to fit into understanding the people first.
Right.
Yeah. So I found that was rather interesting.
Yeah.
Obviously, I found a lot of interesting stuff that was so online then lah.
Right.
Those are definitely much more interesting lah.
I think it's really those interesting stuff. I don't even know how the algorithm works, because I swear I did not search for them, but they just appear, and if you know, you know.
Taylor Swift Rainwater.
Yeah. maybe but on another note, right, because and what you brought up was really interesting, because when we talk about e-commerce, right, usually they are lower ticket items, like for example your household appliances,
right,
and things like that. Probably people don't come across like automotive because those are high ticket items, right? So it definitely seems like the range is very versatile. And I wanted to kind of relate to what you do, because I was in a consulting firm, obviously different industry, and I find it sometimes people very hard to relate, because the range is very broad in terms of what you do. So I wanted to ask you in terms of specifics, right? What do you actually consult on? What areas can you help on in terms of maybe like tasks or maybe areas that are more tangible, so that people can understand what exactly do you do, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So the ones where more common people can really relate to is number one, hey, I have stuff to sell.
Right.
I have a brand.
Yeah.
I want you to fully manage my brand in these marketplaces.
I see.
So we manage marketplaces like Last Mall, Shopee Mall, Tokopedia, Tmall. So these are familiar, and TikTok Shop as well.
Okay.
So anyone who be wanting to go into this, the first one they would usually ask us. Right. So then we would then decide whether we want to go forward with the brand.
I see. Okay.
However, there are some businesses where are a little bit more complex. So for example, they already have an existing e-commerce team in the company. They are doing very well. However, they want to further boost their sales and optimize, but they don't know where to do so.
I see.
So then our company will do the data analytics for them, and then we decide whether to do a one-day training or either to consult them or coach them.
Right.
So these are some of the options where it's more of like per problem basis. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I think that's definitely much clearer in terms of, and more interesting as well, because you're not just dealing with just really setting up as well, right? You're talking about really just growing and the data that is involved, right?
Yep.
I guess in terms of maybe just, I know this is perhaps like trade secret as well, but maybe one trend that you find fascinating in terms of, I guess, the purchasing trends that you've observed maybe in the past few months for this year, right?
I think for this year, it's very notably that social media, it's a huge influence towards users.
Right.
Number one, I think people have started to shift from searching on Google to searching on maybe YouTube or say for example TikTok,
right,
because all these short form videos gives the visibility.
Right.
And number one, we are all visual creatures, right?
Yeah.
So having that visibility on these platforms help people to spark inspiration of that particular brand. So we see that more brands and businesses are now understanding how social media plays a part into the e-commerce ecosystem as well.
Yeah.
So I think for those who are considering whether you want to so-called do your branding or giving your content right out there, social media is definitely one thing that you need to consider.
Right. Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense, because I think the limitation of, I guess, back then, the criticism or the reservation about e-commerce is that I can't see it, I can't feel it, I can't touch it, right? So short form video solves that for me, because even as a consumer myself, if I want to, say for example, buy something and I'm not sure how it would look like, I will look for someone that has bought it on I don't know, like Instagram or TikTok, and I want to see what's that experience like using it, or the object itself in my hand or someone's hand, right?
Yeah.
How does it perform, for example? Those are good, I guess, triangulation, if you will, in terms of what the product will be. Like you say, it's inspiration, and also I guess you really just data point to consider whether to buy or not. Yeah.
I think one of the more important elements on top of that is also time.
Right.
Is that nowadays a lot of people's attention has been split. Whether you have family, you have work, you need to travel.
Yeah.
Minus all of that, you don't really have much time to really spend in reading a content. So the quicker way is seeing is believing.
It's true.
So hence people they pay more attention onto social media in video formats rather than written format. And if we were to look at how books are, I believe that more and more people prefer to listen to podcasts,
audiobooks,
watch videos, audiobooks, and watch as well rather than reading a book.
Yeah. Makes sense. Yeah, I think coming up, I guess to the final part of the interview, I wanted to kind of touch on probably on a more slightly personal note, right? How do you define success, and how has it changed over the years? And I ask this because I think you have literally seen a lot of growth in the commercial area, and I wonder how different has it shaped your thinking as well when it comes to defining success as well, right?
I kid you not, there's still a lot for me to learn and to be exposed of. I know that success for everyone can be different. It could be materialistic. However, for me and how our company treat our values is that success is treated whenever we successfully help a client. I think number one, we come from a very genuine approach. We genuinely want to help to solve a problem. When we are able to do that, I think the success feeling is much better. Obviously, money it's something that will come along with it, but I believe in really genuinely helping and solving problems.
Right. Yeah. I think that's a good approach. I think it quite aligns to even I guess my past experience in running teams as well. Right. I always felt that if you're genuine in really just uplifting one another, I think everything else will follow as well, right?
I hope so.
Yeah. I think maybe the one more interesting question that again I emulated this from Tim Ferriss. It's just a different way of asking the question. Is I wanted to ask you, if you imagine you can have a sign at every sellers conference or sellers university or training sites, right? What would you have it say to, I guess, maybe to impart certain messages to your fellow sellers and perhaps even like potential clients, right?
Okay, so throughout the podcast, probably you have heard me saying about not giving up, but this is just me.
Okay.
It doesn't mean that it could be taken on by someone else so easily. And I do not demean it as being simple.
Right.
But if there's one phrase, they have stuck to me before even I begin my consultancy and up to now, it's always Buzz Lightyear.
Wow. Okay.
To infinity and beyond. Right?
Yes.
If you look at what my company name is, it's truly inspired from there.
Wow.
And from a personal experience, I always believe that there's no limitation.
Right.
Only if you decide that you want to go and get it, there's no limit in your mind.
Yeah.
That's why you can go beyond infinity.
Yeah. No, I agree, because it's so much more helpful to operate in the abundance mindset than in the scarcity mindset, isn't it? Right? Because if you constantly live in a scarcity mindset, then you are bounded by a lot of constraints, reasonable or unreasonable. You're bounded by negativity. You're bounded by a lot of stress, actually, sometimes. So to be able to say to infinity and beyond infinity, it's an uplifting message in a way that I think that it's much more helpful to think that we can win together rather than it's a zero-sum game at the end of the day. Right?
I mean, take my story for example. Knocking doors on 223 cafes. I don't know who else would want to do it, but I did it simply because I believe that it was able to be done.
Right.
But even though if I failed, it opened a new opportunity for me and I achieved what I needed to achieve. I will always hold that story true to my heart.
Yeah, and I'm so glad I asked that question. I guess as the final note, thank you so much, Sam, for being on the show. I think I've learned so much more and I truly enjoyed the conversation with you.
Thank you very much, Zen.